Welcome to the Live Courageously podcast show, episode 75. I'm your host, John Duffy, and Live Courageously has been the conscious theme of my life for the last 3 years since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, and an unconscious theme for most of my life. Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. There is something contagious about someone who is courageous. Today's show is with a very dear friend and a brave guest, and I'm very excited about having her share her story, her poems, her message, and having a conversation with her. My intro of my guest, CLEO, was written by her friend that she calls the guy. So let's go. CLEO DELONER, a true survivor, a proud veteran of the war in Somalia, a 3-time suicide survivor, an author, a public speaker, an ardent supporter of our military and first responders, and an outspoken champion for post-traumatic stress disorder issues and suicide prevention. CLEO was born of a rape, conceived in violence, raised in neglect, shame, and abuse. She experienced incredible trauma while in Somalia, where she survived a horrific firefight, struggled to save a severely mutilated child, and was forced to drive through women and children with a HUMVEE to save her fellow military brethren. Upon returning home, CLEO served as a police officer, a corrections officer, and a counselor at her church. Unfortunately, her internal battles only intensified. She found herself combating the anguish, the pain, the nightmares, and the screams by taking countless prescription medications, suffering through hundreds of electric shock sessions, and being admitted to mental health facilities well over 30 times. CLEO is a remarkable storyteller. Not only is her story one of immense pain, but a story of remarkable strength and enduring hope. She has a remarkable way with words that puts you inside some of the worst situations imaginable, and they bring you to the other side with a joyous tear in your eye. CLEO's journey and her courageous path to healing is nothing short of a miracle and is a story not to be missed. With that, greetings, CLEO. Thank you so much for joining me on Live Courageously.
Thank you, Pale Hulk. That's a pretty intense write-up that my buddy made, huh?
Yes, indeed. I think, and he obviously has a way with words too. He captured so much of the power of the journey that you've been through, which you're about to share with us. And, it was just reading it, and just even hearing it out loud just made it even more powerful. And we'll talk about that thing, the Pale Hulk thing, but that's later. So I always like to start the show with 2 questions. The first one is, most of my guests are people I know personally, and clearly I know you. So how did we meet? How do you remember the story of our meeting and how we became to be friends since then?
Well, I took my friend and my tia, my aunt, my sister to San Diego to watch the band CTS, Called to Serve, perform a concert for the birthday party of the oldest living Pearl Harbor survivor, his 105th birthday. And the party and the concert was on the USS Midway in San Diego. And they're a local band here that I go to a lot of their concerts and have been for years and know them personally. So prior to the concert, we were doing a tour of the USS Midway, and you were in my tour group. And per usual, both of us extroverts started talking to each other and learned a little bit about each other, and spent most of that tour together. And after the concert, we met up again and we spoke. And according to you, I threatened you and told you that if you did not purchase my books, that I would throat punch you. Now, I vaguely remember doing that. I'm not going to blame my memory for this. I do, however, know that this is something I've said in the past to other people, and it appears it is my way of showing affection.
Well, I'll go back a little, and yes, all that up until a point is 100% true. I'll go back a little earlier. We were on the ship, yes, and we're both extroverts, and we started talking. And then at the end of the program, I remember I asked you about what your story was, and you responded, "You sure you want to know?" And of course, I said, "Yeah, I do." And then you shared it with me, and then you said, "You still wish you heard it?" And I was like, uh, it gave me a big pause. And then when we were outside the ship was when you basically told me about the book you wrote at that point. It was Trigger Points, I believe is the name of the book.
Trigger Pieces.
Trigger Pieces, excuse me. And then at that point, you told me I could get it on Amazon. And I said, yeah, I'll get it. You said, no, you're going to get it tonight and you're going to read it. Otherwise, I'm going to punch you in the throat. I could never forget that. So, and of course, I did get the book and I did read it. And I recommend everybody to buy it on Amazon. Just like the guy said, you take people on a journey. You took me and as a reader down into hell, into some of the darkest places you could go. But then you brought it back out and you brought back to the light and you brought back the message to hope. And so I was inspired by reading that poetry. I must say it was probably the darkest, depressing stuff I ever read. But that wasn't, if I was left there, I would have really regretted it. But you didn't leave us there. You took us to the other side. So it was powerful. Thank you. Thank you for threatening my life to get me to read it, though.
Well, apparently it works. And, you know, I sold another book. So,
it worked.
Well, yeah, it's, you know, back then as that book was written during my deep, dark days when I was enveloped by darkness. And, you know, my outlet was to write. You know, some people do yoga or run or lift weights or do cocaine, drink, whatever, right? For me, it was writing, and I had to purge what I call the PTSD poison. And, you know, so I just had to spill it out. And that's why the book is titled Trigger Pieces, because they are pieces that can trigger you. And, yeah, when you're enveloped in that kind of darkness and there's no other way to get something out, that's how I did it. And my belief is that when you get something inside of you, if you speak it or you write it, you've then given it breath, you've given it life. And anything that has breath and life can be destroyed. And so I turned these afflictions into entities that I was able to defeat and ultimately destroy.
Well, once again, I recommend people read it. You got to be prepared because it will trigger you and it is painful, but it takes you to the other side and brings you to the light. So I definitely highly recommend it. My next question always is, and we can go any way you want with this, is what does live courageously mean to you, since that's the name of the show and where I'm coming from?
Well, you know, I've thought about this over the last few days in our conversations, and you know, a lot of people will ask others, you know, who's your hero? You know, some people have superstars, movie stars, music stars, professional players, actors. A lot of people say Jesus Christ. My hero is the human spirit. The human spirit is incredibly resilient. And I think that most people, regardless of what adversity they're facing, their human spirit will ultimately take control. So I think that just on a very basic general level, I think most people do live courageously because we have no other choice, right? Well, we have a choice. You know, we can take ourselves out, which, as you know, I've tried 3 times to take myself out. So living courageously is, I think it becomes almost a natural thing because it's a survival mechanism that's embedded in humans, right? We take that next step, we take that next breath. We continue to pull ourselves up out of bed and face the day, even though we know what we're going to face is going to be trials and tribulations, and maybe that darkness of depression, of PTSD, a traumatic brain injury, of MST, military sexual trauma, of drug addiction, alcohol addiction. And so I think just in general, most people unknowingly live courageously, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It's a little difficult, I think. It sounds narcissistic and arrogant for me to call myself courageous, right? I don't feel that I was courageous. I felt that I was doing what I knew how to do, and that was to survive. And with my faith in God, you know, it was him. It was him that really was picking me up and getting me to the next place, and you know, guiding me and directing me. He put amazing people in my life. He put all the dogs in my life that save my life every day. He's put wonderful people in my life that encourage me and support me, inspire me, push me to use my potential and my talents. And So I guess if that's referred to as courageous, well, I think a lot of people live courageously.
I hear you. I hear you. And I think you're right in saying that. And I also know, I mean, you've written in both books some incredible poetry, and also you've written all kinds of articles for online Havoc a website. But I know you have a particular poem that you wrote that kind of addresses a message that you want to share of all the, and you have so many of them. But maybe if you could, I'd love to have you share that message with the audience.
Yeah. So this is a piece I wrote way back in. Let me see what the year was on this. 10 October of 2015. So it's been a minute. It's a little bit old, but it still stands strong today. And this was published as an article in the Havoc Journal, which is a military online magazine. So I'll read this. It's a little bit long, and I'm looking at my computer, so I'm not going to be looking at you, Pill Hulk. So this is titled, oh, and also I want to alert people that this can be triggering, especially if you're a combat vet and you suffer from debilitating PTSD or traumatic brain injury, any kind of symptoms of depression. So it can be triggering, and I just want the audience, whoever's out there listening, just if it gets to be too intense or too much, then I would encourage you to walk away and come back later whenever you collect yourself. So I generally have to do a trigger warning before I read some of my pieces. That's why the title of that book is Trigger Pieces, because they are triggering. So this is titled The Day I Said Goodbye to Myself. Also, I may or may not display some emotion. I get a little bit emotional sometimes when I read this, and I try to maintain when I'm speaking publicly, but just be warned. Sometimes my eyeballs sweat. Soldiers don't cry, our eyeballs sweat. So there it goes. The day I said goodbye to myself. If I could turn back time to 12 January 1993, the day I deployed to Somalia, the last time I saw myself. In preparation for my first deployment, I took the time to say goodbye to myself. I gathered some small boxes, each one with a label: hope, dreams, smiles, laughter, compassion, faith. Upon my return, I would be able to open each box and take what I needed of that which I would lose. The box of hope contained a paperclip representing that hope could hold everything back together. An empty water bottle representing the emptiness I would feel, knowing that it could be refilled as many times as I wanted with anything I wanted. A lighter representing the eternal flame of the human spirit. The box of dreams contained a picture of a sunrise, reminding me that every day is a new chance at life, an opportunity that many of my warrior brothers and sisters would no longer have. A picture of a sunset, reminding me that if I choose not to live, the light will eventually go away, leaving me enveloped in darkness. The box of smiles contained many pictures of me and my loved ones, everyone smiling. On the back of each photo, a description of the captured moment. The box of laughter contained old recordings of my favorite comedians to remind me that humor is found in the smallest things. The box of compassion contained a broken eggshell to remind me that when I touched it, how fragile the human heart and soul are. They need to be treated with sensitivity, compassion, and understanding. How fragile life is and how it can be crushed in a moment. The box of faith contained the Holy Bible and a wooden cross, the words of my Lord that will guide me through my life. The cross where Jesus gave his life for me, like my warrior brothers and sisters gave their life for me in our country. I then began a physical inventory. I looked down at my feet that filled my boots, crisp, clean desert boots. I thought of the final steps I would take on American soil, the steps I would have to take in defense of my brothers and sisters, the steps I would have to take in defense of the innocent, and the steps to defend my nation. I observed my knees. I hoped they were calloused enough after the many times I was on them in prayer, wondering how many times war would bring me to my knees in fear, in sadness, in sorrow, in pain, and in guilt. Would I have the strength to rise again to my feet, the ones that now wore dusty boots. I studied my hands. I envisioned them gripping my weapon tightly, the power they would soon hold to end a life, to save a life. Would they tremble when the time came to pull the trigger? Or would that come afterward? How many times will they be stained with the blood of my enemy, my comrades, my own? Would they hold my face at the end of the mission, catching my tears? Would they clench in fists of anger? I looked at my chest that caged my heart. I wondered if my chest could keep it contained while facing the enemy, or would it beat so fast in the midst of chaos that it would leap from my body? Would it still have the capacity to hold all the things in those boxes when I return? Or would it become so hardened and scared that it could only hold rage? I walked to a mirror and stared at my reflection. I looked at my ears. I wondered if I would be able to handle hearing the god-awful screams of anguish, the deafening explosions, the sounds of bullets. When I return, will music sound the same? What about the cries of a baby, the laughter of a child, the voices of my loved ones? Or will any sound I hear only bring irritation, overrun by the sounds of battle? I focused on my nose, knowing I would get familiar with the smell of gunpowder, the stench of blood, rotting bodies, death, the strong aroma of sweat after days on end with no shower, going from mission to mission. Fear. Would I experience the smell of fear? The fear of my enemy if I get close enough? The fear that I might emit? I looked at my mouth, savoring the flavors of my last home-cooked meal, already looking forward to my first home-cooked meal upon returning, knowing that I would eat many field rations. Would food ever taste the same again? Would it taste better? Would I even care? I knew my mouth would scream out my battle cry. Would it hunger for blood? Would I then taste blood? Would I know what fear tastes like? Would the god-awful scream I hear come from my own mouth? Would I ever be able to speak words of love after war, or just words of pain? It was time now to look myself square in the eyes. They were filled with wonder and curiosity. But as I looked deeper, I saw a speck of fear from the uncertainties I would witness. Mangled bodies that had been shot, blown up, and burned was in the future of my mind's eye. The atrocities that mankind are capable of inflicting on each other was something I was about to be exposed to. Will these eyes ever bring sleep again? Or will they just see the images of war every time they close? Will they ever be able to see innocence afterward? Or will they only see evil and look at every person they meet with suspicion? Will they ever again hold that spark of life? Or will they be dead like the darkness of battle? I looked at my head where my mind lives. I knew it would be tragically altered during this deployment. How long can it last in battle before it breaks? Will it contain horrific secret thoughts that can never be spoken of? Will it be able to wrap itself around the things I would witness and do? Would it even remember anything? What will it convince me of as I sit alone with my thoughts after a mission? Will it transport me back home where the chaos of battle is absent? Or will it embrace the chaos and feed me strength? I was now done. As I took a final look, I wondered if I would recognize myself when I saw my reflection upon returning home. I smiled one last smile, looked deep into my own eyes, whispered goodbye, and went to war. I can't hear you.
Wow. Very, very powerful. Very powerful.
You okay, Jeff?
You know, I'm just thinking because it hit me on a lot of different levels, and I'm just trying to process. My brain's going around different places with it. You wrote it 9 years ago.
Yeah.
How did it feel today reading it 9 years later? And obviously have gone through a lot in those 9 years since you wrote it. What are you feeling today in reading it and kind of revisiting it? I guess that's what I'm just curious because it isn't easy to kind of everything you put in there was so just well written, but it was just so emotional and authentic.
Thank you. You know, obviously, you know that 9 years after returning home from Somalia, I attempted suicide by firing a bullet into my face. I shot myself in a suicide attempt, and that was the most brutal uh, act that I perpetrated upon myself. And this was obviously written years after, because I'm coming up on 22 years since the shooting. But tomorrow is going to be 31 years that I've returned home from Somalia. So 22 years ago, on June 24th, will be the day I shot myself. And 31 years tomorrow, I've been home from Somalia. And reading that piece, it reminds me that all of those metaphorical boxes, I still have those things. I have the hope, I have the faith and the laughter and the smiles. And for a lot of years, like I said, I was enveloped by that darkness. But to live courageously, as we've covered before, is taking those things and attempting to re-implement, and then you re-implement them into your life post-combat, post any trauma. And it was incredibly difficult. Clearly, I wasn't doing that, because I have attempted suicide 3 times, and I went through 6 months of electric shock therapy 3 times a week for 6 months. Multiple medications, obviously. And so being enveloped by that darkness, it was hard to see the box of faith and what it contained, and the box of hope and what it contained. And I knew they were always there, but it always seemed like they were just out of my reach, because the darkness was impenetrable at times. And I couldn't access them, and my head was really screwed up with severe combat PTSD and traumatic brain injury, of course. And medication didn't help, and the electric shock therapy didn't help. And so, looking back to where I was 22 years ago, sitting on the tailgate of that truck with a rifle pointed to my face, and 31 years ago arriving home from Somalia, it's sometimes it seems like it was yesterday, sometimes it seems like it was a million years ago, and sometimes it doesn't seem like it even happened at all. And I think that one of my mottos is not necessarily a motto, but it's more of a mantra, I guess. Keep putting my left in front of my right, marching to the cadence of life. Because in the military we march to cadences, left, right, left, right, left. But the biggest thing is never surrender, which is that song by Corey Hart back in the 80s. It came out when I was a teenager, and it spoke to me at a time in my life where I was going through a lot of horrible stuff in my home life. And hearing that song for the first time, it was like it was giving me permission. Part of the lyrics say, "No one can take away your right to fight and to never surrender." And it was giving me a right to fight for my life as a young person, to have that hope, to have that faith. And who would I be as an adult, and what kind of job would I have, and what kind of changes in the world could I make? You have all these hopes and ambitions when you're a young person, and then in a blink of an eye, you're sitting here with John Duffy at 53, almost 54 years old, talking about shooting yourself in combat and writing books. And hey, that's really courageous. That's living courageously, So it's kind of a little backwards. And you've had a pretty spicy life yourself. And if you look back and discuss this with somebody, and you just sit back for a second, you put it in perspective, you're like, wow, I've been through a lot. I've done a lot. And the reason I don't see it as courageous is because I lived it, right? When I used to do public speaking, and people come up to me, it's like, man, it's so courageous of you to share your story, and it's so inspirational, and blah, blah, blah. And to me, it's normal, because I lived it. It's not anything special to me, but I can see how people can become enamored about it, right? Because it is the fact that I shot myself and lived is less than 5% of people that shoot themselves in the head and face actually live. And the fact that I never lost consciousness, and I was able to walk around, secure the weapon, and drive, and so I can understand why that's interesting to people.
Well,
but
I don't know if it's just interesting. I know when you shared the story that with me, it was just, everybody has their own challenges in life, everybody goes through their own journeys and struggles and everything. Some worse than others.
Sure.
But when you shared that, it was just that it was both horrendous and horrible to hear it from you, but then it was also a miracle that you survived it and that you went on to do what you have done. And that was more what kind of caught me, was that you had another chance and you took that chance. And that wasn't there was a bigger story in your life than that, because the story could have ended there, but it didn't end there, and your life didn't end there. So I was just so moved by the power of that and the power of the hope that came from that dark, horrible place that you were in. But to go back a little bit, I'm going to ask you, with the song Never Surrender, that was a song, and I'm going to share it on my newsletter because it's a powerful song. That was a song that kind of gave you strength when you were younger, dealing with the trauma and abuses of your childhood and your youth. Was there something similar that got you through the next phases of the military trauma and all that eventually got it turned around for you? Was there a song, a message, or something that was the next thing that got you through, like that did when you were younger?
Well, Never Surrender has been in my life since it came out, and to this day. I just listened to it the other day. It's on every playlist I have, and it shows up randomly and surprisingly enough at the times that I need it the most. Interesting, right? So back in the day, 93, of course, there were only cassette tapes. There were no such thing as CDs, and clearly no MP3s and iPods and stuff. So most of my footlocker was stacked with those cassette tape cases, right? It holds 24 cassette tapes. And I had a Walkman, right?
There's a lot of people who don't know what we're talking about right now.
I know, right? We're old. So I had a Walkman, and I think I took like a 6-month supply of AA batteries, right? Because the Walkman will eat up the batteries. And I used to listen to, I still do actually, but I used to listen to a lot of Christian music. And back then, it was Michael W. Smith, right? And interesting enough, and I don't even know if you know this story, Duffy, but if I would have told you this before the interview, you would have said, "Oh my gosh, you got to share that story." I'm like, "All right, bro."
How many times did I say that to you?
I know. So I love Michael W. Smith, right? I've been listening to him since I was 13 years old. You know who Michael W. Smith is?
Yeah, you shared that with me earlier in one of our
super,
conversations together.
super popular Christian artist, still to this day. And years ago, I went to Tennessee to my publisher's home, and we're driving from Nashville to the airport. He's like, "Hey, that's where Michael W. Smith is." I'm like, "What? Michael W. Smith is what?" He's like, "Oh, you know him?" I said, "Do I know him?" I listen to his music. And he's like, "You want to meet him?" I'm like, "Say again? You want to meet him?" I'm like, "You kidding? I mean, who's going to say no to that, right?"
Right.
And I don't get starstruck by people, right? I look at stars as, they just have a different job, right?
Right.
Michael W. Smith's a little bit different, right? So prior to meeting Michael W. Smith, because we went to his home, to his recording studio, he was working on a new album, which I, got an advance copy signed, and, I got to hang out with Michael W. Smith. Prior to going there, I wrote a piece for him that is titled "The Voice in the Box," which is his cassette tape and my Walkman, right? The Walkman is the box.
Huh.
And it's about how his music got me through so many things growing up, and a soldier in combat, when I would come off of missions and I would sit on my cot and I would get my Walkman and I'd put a Michael W. Smith tape on and put my headphones and just, listen to the messages of hope and encouragement through his voice and the lyrics. And so I wrote this piece titled "The Voice in the Box" for Michael W. Smith. And when I met him, I got to read it to him and give him a signed copy. And it's actually published in the book Zero. And it even says, dedicated to Michael W. Smith. And later I burnt it on a piece of suede for him because I've met him a total of 3 times. The third time that I met him at his home, I took him I burnt the lyrics into a piece of suede as a gift for him. But the second time I met him, of course, he had given me concert tickets. He was going to be here in Phoenix, and backstage tickets. So I got to take a guest with me to meet him backstage and, go to the concert and stuff. So Michael W. Smith got me through a lot, and he still does. His lyrics, even those old ones from back in the '80s. Yeah, so
So
and Bon
music,
Jovi, lots of
yeah.
music. But
So music obviously has been and having those songs with those messages that encourage, uplift, and inspire play a big role. I mean, I know in my life too. It's just songs now. There's a song I play every morning from Zach Williams, and it's the same kind of thing. It's just like it puts you in a different state of mind. It starts you in that state of mind. So yeah, I mean that's music is powerful if you have the right songs.
well, I'm a writer, and so words are very, very important to me, and I'm very much about the lyrics. And it seems pointless to me to write a song that doesn't touch other people's soul. When I do my writing, I try to use all five of my senses because I want it to touch the reader's soul when they read it. And I want my soul to be touched when I listen to music or when I read something. And so music has been probably the most powerful influence in my life outside of the Lord, of course, right? But music is, I mean, it's everything, it is everything. And I'm always looking for good lyricists. Yeah, it
I hear you.
saved my
Well,
life multiple times.
well, writing is, and that's a phase of your life, obviously, with the two books, Trigger Pieces and Zero, but also some of the, and of course, like I said to you, yeah, you should share that. You should share that, and I could ask you to share stories until like 12 midnight tonight, but we can't do that. So, but
Yeah,
just some of the articles you wrote on Havoc online, that military site, just
the
the
Havoc
title.
Journal.
What's it called? Have a journal, right?
Yeah.
The titles alone, even without the ones that just some of them, you saved my life, which was just the title alone, and then there's another piece to that, right?
Yeah, it's titled "You Saved My Life." ... Because anybody that knows me, I use ...
Right.
It's titled "You Saved My Life, and I hated you for it."
And I hated you for it. So just that title alone is powerful, and you know that you're about to read a powerful piece. So just the titles that you choose with words. I mean, another one was "Deployed to America." I mean, that by itself, you were deployed to Somalia, but then you write this piece called "Deployed to America," which is a powerful story. I recommend everybody to read that as well. But just the titles, or thank you for your service, and that that's going to be not exactly what you expect it to be. And so once again, some of the titles you even chose for these Havoc Journal articles just capture what the story's going to be just alone in the title. So I recommend everybody to go there online and look them up and read these powerful stories, because as much as I want to say, could you read that? I can't. So I got a restriction on me or self.
Well, the thing is, the problem with my book, it is deep, it's graphic, it's intense, it's dark,
Right.
and it's called Trigger Pieces for a reason. And when I have an opportunity to physically, personally give somebody a book and sign it for them, I always tell them to be careful, be careful, be careful. Most people report to me, man, I could only read a couple pieces at a time. I have to put it down. Or, I mean, I can't finish this. It's too much. The problem in reading the book is the titles are very thought provoking. So when you finish reading a piece and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're trying to chew on that and absorb it and process it, you see the title to the next piece, and you're like, oh, what is this about? And you're just like, oh my God. And so it's difficult to put down in that sense, because you're right. The titles are very thought provoking, and it kind of hooks people, right? That's what you do as a writer. You want to hook
Sure.
them and reel them in like you're some sort of crazy fisherman.
Well, you also, with the books, you also did. I mean, you've done, for a while there, you were doing speaking, and you were going out and speaking and sharing your story. Tell us a little bit about that, or maybe a highlights from that. That was
Yeah,
a period.
it wasn't so much sharing the story. It was, I mean, it was sharing the story, but it was more to help lower the amount of suicides in the warrior community, the veteran community. 22 veterans a day, one active duty a day commit suicide. The 12 to 15 first responders. And having come away from 3 suicide attempts, obviously the one most brutal was shooting myself. having come out of that with a newfound hope and joy and happiness for life, I knew that if there was somebody out there that was struggling with the same kind of stuff, if they heard this and they saw that a person can get past that, it may give them a spark of hope where they might reach out for help. And if I was able to help, change someone's life, inspire someone's life where they could change it, and just kind of pay it forward thing. So it was more of, this is who I am. And I would use my book, like I would cover my childhood by one of the pieces in my book titled The House of Pain. And I would speak briefly about how childhood PTSD can, evolve and, get worse, and depending on the type of trauma you went through as an adult. And so, yeah, it was just promoting the book in a sense, but mostly kind of like you, giving my book away all the time, right? And just getting up there and saying, hey, this is what I've been through. A lot of you have been through absolute worse, and some not as bad. There's a way through this. You can get through this, and in my speaking engagements, it's interesting because, like you said in the book, I'll pull people into the darkness, right? Come on, I'm pulling them into the darkness. And, then you just kind of shine a light, throw them back into the light, pull them back into the darkness. That's how I did the speaking engagements. I don't really want to talk about, I just don't want to sound arrogant, but, I always got standing ovations at the end of the talks. And, during the talks, people were just, you could hear a pin drop, but you hear a lot of sniffling, a lot of crying, right? And the response afterwards was always very, it was intense, right? And it just, it got to the point where it was just a little bit overwhelming.
Sure.
It was emotionally charging and emotionally draining. So I stopped for a while, and then it just became, I stopped forever doing the public speaking. So you can take that and do with it as you wish. But
Well,
yeah, I don't go on the road and do public speaking anymore.
It's hard for people who haven't ever done it or haven't ever shared stuff that emotionally to yourself. But you're right, because you in particular, when sharing that, you're reliving it. It's affecting you emotionally, because if
Sure.
you're not being affected, your audience isn't going to be affected. So you're kind of, feeling
Sure.
the pain and sharing that. And, there's a point where eventually your brain and your body goes, all right, already, enough of this. It's just, why are you putting yourself through it and through it and through it? And of course, it's to help others, and that's why you were doing it. But,
Sure.
at some point, you got to, maybe make a different choice, and you did. So that's all cool. And then you started to do these burn-ins, and and what's the word? Because I've never heard that word before. Live courageously. Yes, that I have one right here. She did, and she has a better one.
Look we got matching ones, brother.
This was the first draft that she did in how long did you scramble to get it to me?
Oh man, that is so terrible. I gotta send you a new one. That's one of my worst pieces of work. It looks like a 3-year-old did it.
So this was when we were in Arizona and Phoenix. That's when she gave it to me. And she had scrambled to give it to me because I was in town, and we got together for lunch and had some great hamburgers. And but just to say, I don't wear jewelry. I've never wore jewelry in my life. Rings. I haven't worn a watch in 20 years. I don't wear nothing around my neck. I haven't taken it off since I got it in Phoenix. And it's, got me into some great conversations everywhere I've gone, including to places that people never heard of, like Yap. I'm on a plane and I'm telling people about live courageously and how I got this and how CLEO gave it to me. And so, it's a great gift, and thank you so much. I really appreciated it then, and clearly,
you're welcome.
To wear it. So CLEO is going to make a lot more of those. But the first thing you did for me and sent to me, which was also, thank you so much for, which is this right up here, which was, and in the back it says "Eye of the Tiger," and it was kind of coincidence. You didn't actually know it, but that was a song that got me through a phase of my life, which was that, the eye of the tiger, and just that you needed that kind of mentality to survive. So, and
that's what I call a God hug, right? That's a God hug.
Yes, and somebody else once told me God's wink, but I like God's hug better. I think it's
There's a piece in my book. There's a piece in my book titled "Hugs from God."
Well, that one just kind of really, so I got that, and of course it's on behind me on the shelf, and it was very timely. And then, of course, these are some of the ones that CLEO's going to make a lot more for me. These are the courageous, but they're going to even be better. The one she has on, because she got it even better. But what is that word? Because when you
Pyrography.
Say it one more time.
Pyrography. Pyrography.
Pyrography. See, so that's a word.
Pyro
burn
is fire, right? Is fire. Pyrography is writing. So it literally means fire writing.
Fire writing.
Pyrography.
Cool. So that's what she's done, and done so many different types of burn-ins. And I'm going to just throw up a couple of them because there's some really cool ones like this one. If you want to comment on it, this is one that you did with all that.
That's a piece from my book that I dedicated to a combat medic buddy, Angels on the Battlefield.
Angels on the Battlefield. Then you did this one, which is also with all these dog tags. And,
that's those are the 44. Now there's 45 killed in action, Somalia. That's my Somalia memorial.
Wow. And there's this one here.
That's on leather.
On leather. And then, of course, I showed you mine. And then there's a couple other ones like this one.
Really awesome. I love that one.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Dreamcatcher.
Spidey. Spider. I don't see any Pale Hulk ones yet, but just saying. And maybe tell the story, because we're going to get a little lighter before we get heavier again. How did I end up with this name, the Pale Hulk? I have no clue.
You know what? I think I saw a picture of you one time, and your face, it reminded me of the Incredible Hulk, but you're not green, you're white. And so I tend to give people nicknames because I have memory issues, and 10 seconds after meeting someone, I don't remember their name. And most people call you JD or Duffy, mostly Duffy, right? But so generally when I give someone a nickname, it sticks fairly well. And I show people your picture and they're like, yeah, I don't see the Hulk in there. And I say, well, you don't know what you're looking at. So to me, you just, and you're working out at the gym all the time, and you're so arrogant and conceited, posting picture of you in the gym, showing your muscles, and you're like, and I lost 10 more pounds, and I'm 70 years old, and I'm like the Incredible Hulk, and I'll crush your head like a grape. And no, I'm just messing with you, but I don't know.
That's all good. I love it. Well,
I'm a writer. I can make up a story on the spot, yeah. But no, I think, I don't even remember. I think just something about a photo of you reminded me of the Incredible Hulk, and so you became the Pale Hulk. And you, all right, admit it, you embraced it.
Hey, when you get a nickname, if it's a cool one, you take it. Add it to the nicknames, whatever.
Yeah.
So
check this out. You're the Pale Hulk.
But I'm a pivot back, because we're gonna probably go a little bit longer. Hopefully, we'll get all my key things in. But I also want to see if you got time to share a story. You told me a great story in Arizona when you went to this prison. Veterans. I don't know if you want to do it today. You can, or we can move if to another time we do it.
Oh no, it's okay. I just wanted to expand a little bit more on the on wood burning.
Please. Let's go back and expand. And
I learned back when I was 14 years old in arts and crafts in high school, and my craft teacher that taught me, his name was Birch Howard, and later I found out years later that he was a Korea War veteran, and he died like 6 years ago. So on the back of every burn, I burn "Forever Grateful, BH," Birch Howard, for his initials. And if I had a business name, it would be Forever Grateful Creations. And wood burning brings me an enormous. Thank you. Wood burning brings me an enormous amount of peace and joy and happiness. It's very, very therapeutic for me. When I'm burning a piece for a specific person that I have spent time with, that I'm close with in my life, I put on music that reminds me of them, and I commit my entire thought process to that person. And the entire time I'm burning an image for them, I'm listening to the music that reminds me of them, and I'm thinking of them, of the time we've spent together, the conversations we've had, the good times, the bad times. And I focus all of my thoughts on that person that I'm making a burn for. And it brings me an enormous amount of joy to see the look on someone's face when they receive a burn, right? And I'm not, exceptionally awesome at it. I'm probably about average, maybe a little below. I recently met this guy through Facebook. He lives in Houston. He's a retired art teacher. And I think he might be listening, him and his wife. So I'm going to do a shout out to my buddy Pyro Craig and his wife Becky. Now, this guy is a seriously talented pyrography artist. And we have many, many phone calls. And, he says I give him tips, but, he's, yeah, he blows my stuff out of the water. But people who do this medium, talk about just the peacefulness of it, burning something into a piece of wood. And again, this image comes to life. So for me, it's incredibly therapeutic. It's my therapy. And with my bum elbows, I haven't been able to do as much as I would like to. So I might have to actually go see a therapist now, Pale Hulk.
and of course, you're working on some the burnings of these dog tags for me as well. So so I look forward to that, and I'm going to be sharing those on my website and sending them to friends as well. So I really appreciate that, and thank you for that. Anything else you want to say on that? Otherwise, I'd love to tell you the story, and we have one more powerful poem that I want you to share as well. But let's maybe go to the story first if you want to go there.
Yeah, whatever's next. You're the producer. Hey, I'm just the guest. You tell me what to do.
Before we do that, I'm just going to take so this is another one that you gave me that hangs up in my car with
the armor of God
in the back with Timothy.
Oh, 2 Timothy 2:3-4.
Correct. So that hangs up in my car. So thank you for that as well. So yeah, let's just shift then to, you told me a story about going to this prison and a very unique experience with, in particular with the military vets who are in that prison, unfortunately, for different things that has occurred in their life. So share that story with us. I think the audience would really appreciate.
Yeah, so it was actually a county jail, and I live in Arizona, Maricopa County, and back then Sheriff Joe Arpaio was the sheriff, and Sheriff Joe is also a veteran, and he was also military police like me. And so he had a very soft spot in his heart for veteran inmates, right? You take a combat vet who's dealing with PTSD, TBIs, MSTs, end up getting busted for committing a crime, and now they're sitting in a jail cell with untreated PTSD. And I can't imagine how horrendous that would be. And Sheriff Joe kept the veteran inmates separate from the general population. And two of his very good friends were friends with the lady who managed my public speaking and book stuff. And they had told Sheriff Joe about me, and he wanted to meet me. So on the third time that I actually met him, he had talked to me about starting a writing program in the jail for veteran inmates, because I always promote the therapy of writing, right? Write it down, give it breath, give it life, it can be destroyed, right? Purge those things. Nobody ever has to see them. You can rip it up, you can burn it, but write. Everybody's story is important. Write your story. It matters. You matter. You are not a zero. Let your story be heard. And so I was going to go once a week to the jail to do a writing program with these veterans to kind of help them purge their trauma. And so Sheriff Joe asked me if I would go do a speaking engagement with the veteran inmates. Now, he always kept the male and female separate, of course, right? And this is the first time he brought male and female inmates together in one room. They were all veterans, and he had the females sitting up front. We were in the chapel. The males were in the back, and there were more males than there were females. And I brought a whole bunch of my books and a whole bunch of journals, because I was, going to hand them out in this writing thing. And so I did the speaking engagement, and it was really, really cool, because Sheriff Joe got up there before me and spoke briefly, to introduce me. And this is the thing for people who don't know about Sheriff Joe. He was a very controversial, a very popular sheriff for the United States. He's the most popular sheriff in the United States and internationally even. I mean, when I went into his office, he had front page newspapers in London with his picture on it, right? And it said toughest sheriff in America. And So everywhere Sheriff Joe went, there were TV cameras, all the news cameras, reporters, everybody follows him. And this was a big event because it was on Flag Day, which is also his birthday. And I think it was his 86th birthday. And so I wasn't expecting so much media. And, you know, later that night, there was coverage on every major channel here in Arizona. You know, Arizona veteran spends Flag Day and birthday with Sheriff Joe. And, you know, there's footage of me up there walking with the veterans. But afterward, I got to go into one of the jail pods with the veteran inmates and break bread with them. And they made a giant flag cake that said, "Happy birthday, Sheriff Joe," and of course, Flag Day. And he never let the inmates eat meat. And on this day, he let them have hot dogs, which technically probably isn't meat, but you're right. So he let them have hot dogs and these big bags of chips and giant Gatorades. And so I sat in there in a jail pod, you know, where there's, you know, probably 10, 12 inmates that sleep in there. And I just broke bread with some of my warrior brothers and sisters. Well, my brothers, because the females were separate. So I walked around the jail inside the pods, talking to the veterans, you know, "Hey, why are you guys in here? You know, are you struggling? What's going on?" And Sheriff Joe had all the flags of the branches in the jail cell, actual flags. And there, he allowed the veteran inmates to paint patriotic stuff on the wall, you know, eagles and flags and any kind of military type stuff. And so it was really an interesting afternoon. Going there and speaking with them. And one of the pieces, which I'm going to read here in just a second, let me pull it up here on the computer, is titled "Bring It On." And this piece is very, very important to me because it occurred to me, again, you give the affliction life and breath, it can be destroyed. And so whatever it is that we're struggling with, if it's addiction to alcohol or pills or sex or gambling or mental health or bipolar depression, PTSD, TBI, whatever entity is, you know, causing havoc in your life, you simply say, "Bring it on," right? "I'm ready for you, bring it on." And so I end all my speaking engagements with this piece titled "Bring It On" because I like to motivate the crowd. And it was really fascinating reading it to these veteran inmates. And I really felt for them, you know, because I'm them.
Right.
I just wasn't in a jail cell. I mean, I was in my own jail cell up here, you know, for many, many years, but I just couldn't imagine, you know, being locked in jail.
And you were a correction officer for a short period of time too, right?
Yeah, I worked in a maximum security prison in Michigan when I was living there, when I was married. And
wow.
You know, it's a completely different world. I mean, it's like being on another planet, you know, 8, 10 hours at a time, living behind that wall with some very, very dangerous individuals. And one of the things that was frightening and startling, profound, our instructors during the Corrections Academy, they wore these T-shirts, and on the back of the T-shirt it says, "We walk amongst those you fear the most," right?
Wow.
And I'm like, bloody hell, right? I'm going to be walking amongst, you know, murderers and rapists and family annihilators and child killers. And these are the people that civilians fear the most, right? And I'm going to be walking amongst them. In any case, so when I read this piece to these veterans titled "Bring It On," I try to motivate the crowd. And at the end, I'm like, "What are you going to say?" And they're like, "Bring it on." I was like, "What's that?" "Bring it on." So later, they separate the inmates from us, and they're all lined up against this wall in this giant concrete vestibule. And myself and the people I was with and the TV cameras and Sheriff Joe, we walk out the other side, and the inmates are on the other side of this giant concrete vestibule, which echoes really loud. And they've got to stay on the painted line against the wall, right? Because it's got to be very controlled environment. And when I come out, they're like, "Bring it on, bring it on." And I'm looking over there, and the jail guards are like, "You shut your hole, be quiet." So they're going like this, "Bring it on, bring it on." because they were really motivated by this piece of Bring It On. And I try to encourage people to, whatever it is that they're struggling with, just to tell it, bring it on. I've got this. I can deal with this. Bring it on.
Well, I think with that, I think we're ready to hear you share that Bring It On story. Oh,
But first, before I read it, I want you, with all the motivation and inspiration that I've brought you today, Pillhawk, to give me a good sound off of Bring It On.
bring it on. Bring it on.
Bring it on. All right, so here's Bring It On. Now remember, this is about facing the adversity in your life that's bringing you down. And to live courageously, what do we have to do? Bring it on. Tell it to bring it on. So here's the piece. Bring it on. I know who you are. I know what you can do. I know the power you have held over me all these years. I know about the pain that you bring with anger by its side. I have seen what you do to the weak. I have seen you destroy the innocent. I have this to say. Bring it on. I'm ready for you. My weapons will not be the anger and pain that you have used against me. It will be my friends with love by their side. My weapons will be my strength, courage, and character. Yeah, you may bring me to my knees, but know that it will only be temporary. I will rise against you. Yeah, you may make me cry. Good, that's what I need. You fear the tears that will fall from my eyes. You fear the love that I have for my life. You fear me. I know that now, and I no longer fear you. You can no longer control me with anger, hatred, and pain. You will no longer torture me, and you will never defeat me. You can't destroy me. I know who you are. Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.